few days ago, I realized something about myself that honestly should have probably been obvious to me years ago, but I've never really been able to fully articulate it until now. I finally figured out why I've never really enjoyed most comedy movies. And I know that sounds like a random realization, but it's something that I have really pondered over for a very long time because my entire life I thought maybe I just had a dark sense of humor, or maybe my sense of humor was just really too serious or just serious, or maybe I just didn't get comedy the way everybody around me seemed to get it. But then I realized no, that's not it. I don't actually have a dark sense of humor, I have an absurd sense of humor. Those are two completely different things because I do laugh constantly. Constantly. I laugh all day at the weirdness of life. I laugh at absurd situations, human randomness, timing and irony, and the bizarre unfolding of reality. But what I don't usually enjoy is humor that's centered around humiliation, ridicule, or social isolation. And once I recognized that distinction, suddenly so much made sense to me. Because if you really stop and think about it, so much mainstream comedy is built around look how stupid this person is, how embarrassing this person is, look how awkward this person is, look how socially unaware this person is, look how badly this person just failed at life in this situation. And I know some people are going to hear this and immediately think I'm trying to moralize comedy or say that people are bad for laughing at it. And that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, this whole realization actually became way more nuanced the more I thought about it. Because at first I thought, oh, maybe I just don't like humor based around humiliation. But then, me being me, I start questioning myself because I had one of the most absurdly hilarious days imaginable today while I was door dashing in Lincoln, Nebraska. The entire day was basically one long comedy sketch. I escaped Omaha this morning, and yeah, that was that was a very difficult door dashing experience for me. I feel like the only way you could do really well in Omaha, and I'm sure that you probably can do very, very well there, if you know your way around, right? So, like, if I have lived there and grew up there, I'm sure that it wouldn't have been as bad as it became. But because I've never been there in my life and I was just driving through trying to pick up some work, oh wow, it was very, very difficult. And if you've ever driven through Omaha, you know exactly what I mean. The roads suddenly become like 5 lanes with no warning. Exits seem to appear out of nowhere. Your GPS starts speaking in tongues, or mine did. It's like total chaos. Anyway, so I get to Lincoln, and my very first order is at this brand new Chick-fil-A that apparently doesn't fully exist in physical reality yet. My GPS kept taking me to the wrong location. I've been driving around for like 5 minutes trying to find this hidden Chick-fil-A, and then suddenly I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to call the store because this is not working. And I call, and the employee stays on the phone with me, helping guide me there. And the entire time we are both laughing hysterically. And at one point, I literally drive past the building and yell, there it is, I passed it. And he's dying laughing. I'm laughing. Nobody's irritated or cruel or treating me like I'm stupid, even though I feel really stupid. We're just sharing the absurdity of the situation together. Then I get another order from Hardee's, except I confidently walked into McDonald's looking for the order. Wrong restaurant entirely, obviously. And yet, still, that wasn't enough because after I picked up the food, I then confidently walked into the wrong business establishment to deliver the order. I walk in carrying the food, and the receptionist immediately says, oh, this happens all the time. They're actually across the street. And I'm laughing so hard because at this point, the entire day feels like reality itself has become satire. So I'm running across the parking lot, holding the food, apologizing and laughing and saying, I am so sorry. I am not from here. And the guy goes, yeah, I can definitely tell. It's because of my accent. Again, everybody's laughing, right? Nobody's cruel. Then, because apparently the universe decided the entire day was going to be an experiment in absurdity, I get a GoPuff order. And I don't even know what GoPuff is. Okay, well, I do now. I didn't then. So I pull into this place, and there's this guy outside smoking a cigarette. And I roll my window down, and I go, excuse me, can I ask you something? I'm trying to find this place, GoPuff. I'm not from here. And he looks at me and goes, "Yep, this is it." And I look up and the building literally says, "Go Puff," right in front of my face. And I just start laughing because what else are you supposed to do at that point? And he's laughing too. And that's when I realized something. Like, clearly, I find awkwardness funny, human mistakes funny, absurd situations hilarious. So then why do certain comedy movies make me uncomfortable still? That became the actual question. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the answer is context. Emotional context, because in all of my experiences today, the laughter stayed emotionally connective. Nobody isolated me or degraded me or treated me with contempt or like I was stupid on any level. Again, even though I felt really stupid. The Chick-fil-A employee stayed connected to me through the absurdity. The receptionist normalized the mistake, and the Go Puff guy laughed with me, not at me. The humor stayed warm. And I think that's the distinction my brain has always been trying to identify, because there's a difference between laughing with someone at the absurdity of being human and laughing at someone while they're emotionally isolated, humiliated, or genuinely hurting. Those feel completely different emotionally. And honestly, I think part of the reason I'm so sensitive to this dynamic is because of my own experiences growing up. That situation that I went through in 8th grade, where I became, for the next several years throughout high school, you know, I became the person that people whisper about, isolate, laugh at, socially single out, target, right? And once you experience that kind of group dynamic personally, your nervous system becomes extremely aware of social exclusion dynamics afterwards. You notice who's being isolated, humiliated, whether the laughter feels warm or contemptuous, whether the person still has dignity in the interaction, whether the humor feels connective or socially predatory. So I don't necessarily think I'm paranoid. I think I just notice these things because I've lived it from the opposite, or the from the perspective of the one that's being laughed at, not with. And honestly, that realization actually changed the way I think about comedy entirely, because originally I thought maybe mainstream comedy just normalizes cruelty, but that was way too generalized. And I realize it's more complicated than that, because I don't think most people in real life are actually as cruel as, of course, fictional comedy portrays them to be. In fact, they're not technically supposed to be, right? That's why it's entertainment, I suppose. But my entire day today proved that it's actually quite the opposite. Every single person I encountered today was kind, helpful, warm, and patient, collaborative. Nobody pointed and laughed at me maliciously, which actually made me question something even deeper. If most people in real life don't naturally behave that way, then why does entertainment sometimes exaggerate humiliation so heavily? And I don't necessarily think there's one simple answer to that either. Part of it probably is absurdity, exaggeration, emotional distance, or just fiction to heighten reality to make it more of an entertainment experience. And humor is totally subjective. Everybody experiences things differently based on their own experiences, perceptions, personalities, etc. And I completely understand that. But I still do think there's a fine line there, because humor can absolutely become socially objectifying. It can reinforce that Mean Girls dynamic, that pack mentality, collective group laughter directed towards the vulnerable person, that emotional hierarchy where somebody becomes the joke. And I think that's what makes me uncomfortable. Sometimes, it's not awkwardness itself, it's just when the emotional subtext underneath the humor starts feeling more segregatory, or I don't know if that's a word, isolating, contemptuous, maybe, instead of compassionate or collaborative. And that's the difference, because awkwardness with connection feels hilarious to me, but awkwardness with humiliation is painful, right? And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I realize this is probably why absurdity-based humor resonates with me so deeply. Because absurdity-based humor doesn't require somebody to become less human in order for the moment to be funny. It actually does the opposite. It reminds us that we are all human. We're all confused sometimes. We all get lost. We all walk into the wrong building. We all miss obvious signs directly in front of our face. We all improvise through reality, pretending that we know what we're doing. And that's funny to me. Not because anybody is inherently pathetic or just can't get it together. obviously, but because being alive can just be weird. It can just be awkward. And honestly, I think today reminded me of something really beautiful. People are often far kinder than our society or the society around us can sometimes suggest that they are. Because every single absurd thing that happened to me today could have become humiliating if people had responded differently, but they didn't. And that changed the entire emotional experience of the day. So maybe the real distinction for me isn't awkwardness versus no awkwardness. Maybe it's connection versus like divisiveness. And I think that realization explains my sense of humor better than anything ever has before. And I also want to say this carefully because I'm not trying to become like some kind of severe comedy critic. I'm far from a critic, by the way. I'm not saying anybody should. I'm not saying anybody should laugh at awkwardness or embarrassment or absurd situations. Clearly, I laugh at those things constantly. My entire day proves that. But I do think there's a fine line sometimes because entertainment does shape people. Stories shape people, repetition shapes people, social norms don't just appear out of nowhere. They're reinforced over time through what we collectively reward, normalize, and emotionally participate in. So I do think it's worth at least asking occasionally, when does humor create connection and when does it create emotional isolation? And of course, if it is creating emotional isolation, then maybe we shouldn't participate in that type of humor. And that's just, of course, my opinion.